The original story of Lupin III by Monkey Punch had a powerful, hungry quality to it. Yamada Yasuo, the voice actor of Lupin, also had this quality. And so did we in those days. As a line from Lupin in Castle Cagliostro states,
もう10年以上昔だ。俺は一人で売り出そうと躍起になっている青二歳だった。
Miyazaki Hayao. In the world of classic anime, they've become legends. And now, the 5 voice actors most associated with the extremely long-lasting Lupin III franchise have all passed away. If you happen to hail from certain countries, the wily thief Lupin III will need no introduction. Here in Japan, of course, he's one of the most well-known fictional characters of the past half-century. In Italy, too, Lupin is something of a national hero. As an example, I was once deep in the mountains of Kyrgyzstan on a 3-day horse trek. I happened to encounter an Italian couple who joined us for a quick lunch seated upon the mountain grass. I asked them if they'd heard of Lupin, and the answer was, of course, who hasn't? Lupin's fame in Italy comes despite Lupin being a fictional grandson of the popular fictional French gentleman thief, Arsène Lupin, who first debuted in 1905. Lupin III, however, is a mid-1960s Japanese creation born of the mind of manga artist Monkey Punch, premiering in anime form in 1971. Since the first series in 71, called the Green Jacket series, thanks to Lupin's sartorial affectations, the Gentleman Thief has been the subject of 6 TV series, 9 theatrical animated films, numerous OAVs and TV movies, and 2 live-action films of, questionable quality.
ダイヤが欲しいの。いいとも。エメラルドも欲しいわ。いいとも。
And throughout its first 5 decades, the classic Lupin period, 5 voice actors became indelibly associated with each of Lupin's iconic core characters. Yamada Yasuo portrayed half-Japanese, half-French master thief Arsène Lupin III. Kobayashi Kiyoshi was expert marksman Daisuke Jigen. Masuyama Eiko was femme fatale Mine Fujiko. Inoue Makio was the taciturn master swordsman Ishikawa Goemon XIII. And Goro Naya was Inspector Zenigata Koichi, forever hot on Lupin's trail. Their voices are iconic, but now, as of 2024, all 5 are gone. Masuyama Eiko, the last of that classic Lupin crew, sadly passed away on May 20th, 2024. As the original anime femme fatale, there have been a few more legendary characters in the history of Japanese animation than Mine Fujiko. The sometimes adversary, sometimes lover of Master Thief Arsène Lupin III, Fujiko has been an enduring presence in Japanese pop culture since her debut in the late 1960s. Now, the voice actress who lent Fujiko her iconic, sultry voice for most of the character's history has passed away. Masuyama Eiko, an icon of Japanese language voice acting, was 88. Her death was announced via the official Lupin III Twitter account. Masuyama Eiko was the final surviving member of the original cast of Lupin III. Sadly, with her passing, none of those most associated with the characters in the 20th century remain. Kobayashi Kiyoshi, who portrayed Lupin's gunman partner Jigen Daisuke and with whom Fujiko shared an acrimonious relationship, passed away in 2022. He'd continued playing Jigen up until the year before he died, well into his late 80s. It's no surprise that the Lupin franchise has outlived its most recognized voice actors. Lupin, once very much a product of his time, has stretched far beyond the late 60s that birthed it. The franchise has now been going on for so long that its originating and most iconic voice actors have shuffled off this mortal coil, all while Lupin himself retains his 60s sideburns and keeps driving his old yellow Citroen. Lupin is a man out of time. The admirable actors who have taken over the roles continue to affect a very 70s style of voice acting, while Lupin deals with cryptocurrency and cybercrime. Imagine The Simpsons, a show that's been around for half as long, but has produced way more episodes overall. The Simpsons is still stuck in its late 80s, early 90s sitcom structure, even though Homer Simpson has now shockingly morphed from a boomer
What the hell are you two doing?
into a millennial thanks to cartoon floating time.
You wouldn't understand, Dad. You're not with it. I used to be with it, but then they changed what it was. Now what I'm with isn't it, and what's it seems weird and scary to me.
But the voice actors mostly remain the same,
Krusty Burger.
Krusty Burgers.
even if Julie Kavner as Marge is sadly the worse for wear.
Library and hid it in my backpack and read it with my flashlight in the closet.
Scratch that. Want to think about the terror of the passage of time? The Simpsons is now so old that it actually isn't that much younger than Lupin in the grand scheme of things. Only 19 years its junior. The Simpsons is currently on its 34th season. Lupin, meanwhile, is still chugging along, in some ways more vibrant than it's been in decades, thanks to the 4 separate TV shows that have aired since the early 2010s after a series drought since Part 3, known as the Pink Jacket Lupin, which finished airing in 1985. 5 new voice actors have taken over from the classic era of VAs, doing so in piecemeal fashion as the older VAs have left the industry and passed on. So let's take a moment to learn about the fabulous 5 who helped make Lupin what it is, and the other voice actors who have played their own roles in the legendary saga of Lupin III. Konnichiwa, minasan, and welcome back to Unseen Japan. As always, I'm Noah Oskau, and today, for the first time in a while, we're taking a look at the past of Japanese animation, and the stories of 5 actors who helped define some of the most iconic characters in Japanese pop culture. As a big Lupin fan myself since I was a teenager, I was very sad to hear of Masuyama Eiko's passing, so I'm glad we had the chance to honor her and the other voice actors who helped make Lupin one of Japan's biggest franchises. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving us a like and subscribe for more. And without further ado, let us chase down the legacy of anime's greatest international thief. Yamada Yasuo, more associated with Lupin than anyone else, had the sort of voice you could recognize anywhere. It was a combination of many things: playfulness, sincerity, humor, with a surprisingly cool side.
怖いおじさんがいっぱい来たからね。
藤子ちゃん。
はーい、おじさんはここですよ。すぐ戻ってくるからね。さて何をして遊ぶのかな。
A born Tokyoite, he tended to play stylish outlaws and individualists, when he wasn't playing lighthearted fools. Lupin, who combined all of these aspects, would become the role of a lifetime. Yamada was born in 1932, coming of age in the era when Japan's empire was expanding aggressively. He was a high school student as World War II ended, and found himself obsessed with 2 things: baseball and Hollywood movies. 1947's The Secret Life of Walter Mitty was a big influence. He found himself drawn to Danny Kaye's comedic performance as the titular Mitty.
I design women's hats. Et je le patron sur toi, je le baisse à ton clair, un plat de sauter. Oh man, is it like quoi? Chouan, sur le quesatron. Oh, magnifico!
Wanting to emulate that style of comedy led him on a circuitous pathway of studying theater at Waseda University, joining as an understudy at the prestigious Minge Theater Company, and ending up as a freelance radio performer. A friendship with actor Kumakuro Kazuo, the dubbing voice of Alfred Hitchcock on Japanese TV, led him to the comedic theater troupe Echo Theater. Yamada was encouraged to take on voice acting roles to help fund the troupe's productions. After some early voice acting failures, he got his first real television dubbing role, Clint Eastwood's character in the TV show Rawhide. This was a turning point for Yamada, and his Eastwood voice became highly recognizable, and he continued to voice Eastwood in 40 films until his death.
この10年間、俺はこの店でブラックコーヒーを飲むのが日課だったのに、今日はそのブラックになぜか砂糖が入ってた。たっぷりとだ。だからケチをつけに戻った。さあみんな、 授与してろ。
Yamada was critical of his own voice, saying, "It's a bit stumpy and always sounds like it has a filter over it." This didn't prevent him from quickly becoming one of the most recognizable voices of the 70s and 80s. Yamada first encountered Lupin almost by chance. In 1969, he was working on a play with Kumakura called Nihon no Heiso, Japan's Naval. Very appealing title. When the latter recommended him read through a recent copy of Manga Action to get a feel for his character. Yamada's initial reaction was, what sort of inspiration could I get from a manga? But he soon found himself drawn to the character of Lupin III, obsessively buying each new issue as they came out. Soon he was imbuing his performance in the play with Lupin's very essence. In 1989 he reflected, "I didn't know there was such a wonderful manga in Japan. I was surprised. It's not a manga but a Japanese comic in contrast to American comics. I like the fast tempo, the pleasant rhythm, the overflowing gags, the leaps and bounds that make an overly serious person angry, and above all the fact that it was not about a righteous bandit. I was captivated by the work." Meanwhile, Lupin was already being voiced for the very first time by somebody else.
やったやった。じゃあ誰だ？狙ってる奴は他にもいるさ。だが、まさかあいつがそんなことはしないはずだ。
The very first piece of Lupin animation came into being the same year, in 1969. It was a 12-minute pilot film directed by Osumi Masaaki, meant to drum up interest in a full-fledged Lupin series. The first version of Lupin sounds nothing like the version we'd come to know and love via Yamada. First being voiced by the highly accomplished Hollywood film dubbing actor Nozawa Nachi, who would go on to be the Japanese voice of Bruce Willis, Al Pacino, and many more. There was even a second Lupin, Hirokawa Taichiro, taking over for Nozawa when the pilot film, previously only seen by industry figures and never publicly released, was reworked for TV broadcast in 1971. But Yamada was about to get his chance thanks to a fateful encounter with Lupin director Osumi Masaaki. Osumi happened to be in attendance during a performance of Nihon no Heiso and immediately clocked the Lupin-esque vibes coming off of Yamada.
舞台の上でね、なんか見たことあるようなものが動いてるわけですよ。はっと気がついたら舞台の上でやってる山田康夫の演技がルパンそのものなんですよ。僕から見て。
When the show ended, he immediately approached Yamada to pitch him the opportunity of coming in as Lupin for the greenlit TV show. Yamada didn't even hesitate. "I'll do it." He'd later describe it as a meeting preordained by fate. Yamada poured his personality into Lupin, adding certain idiosyncrasies that remain embedded in the minds of the Japanese public.
忘れるわけないでしょうが、藤子ちゃん。あ、そうかい。聞いた。バケル。このルパン様にな、不可能ってのはねえんだよ。
The performance was so impactful on the character that even Lupin's original creator, Monkey Punch, said that, "I certainly drew the comic Lupin III, but that's nothing more than a world printed on paper, not something complete. It's Yamada Yasuo-san who allowed for its completion via the Lupin III anime adaptation. He brought him so energetically to life. The character would not have come to life with its distinct personality, movement, speech, and intense presence without Yamada." Yamada embraced his deep connection with Lupin, going so far as to avoid taking on any other anime roles. An actor is happy if he meets a role that fits him perfectly even once before he dies, but I was able to meet such a great character and it became a popular work. I have nothing more to say. Noted for his wry sense of humor, viewers often found Yamada to embody Lupin, even when not acting in the role.
そういえばお顔もそっくりね、なんとなくガリバタだけでなし。声もユーモアもまるで本物のルパン三世。
Yamada, often called the Eternal Lupin Eien no Lupin Sansei, may not have been the very first to voice the role, but another voice actor can claim to have played Lupin's right-hand man for most of the character's existence, and from his very first appearance in animation. That's Kobayashi Kiyoshi, the original voice of marksman Jigen Daisuke from 1969 all the way until 2021. Kobayashi, noted for his gravelly baritone, began his career as, of all things, an English-Japanese translator. A man after my own heart. Born in Tokyo in 1933, only a year after Yamada Yasuo, he spent part of his elementary education in Tochigi and Saitama prefectures as an evacuee from bombed-out Tokyo. Despite these experiences, he was fascinated by the English language and excelled in his studies. He had a subscription to the English language Japan Times since he was in middle school and would tutor classmates in the language. After failing to enter the prestigious Tokyo University, Kobayashi fell back on Nihon University, where he began studying theater in the hope of learning about how people lived. After graduating, he joined the left-wing Izumi Theater and ended up involved in the mass protests against the revision of the United States-Japan Security Treaty. This is, of course, a topic that our viewers here at our channel may already know a bit about. He put his English skills to the test by translating the script of the American film The Caine Mutiny, impressing a friend from college, Kobayashi Morio, who happened to work as a dubbing actor. Morio brought Kobayashi in as a dub translator. When working as a translator, company higher-ups, aware of his acting credentials, pushed him to start voice acting for them as well. Translation led to a career as a dubber. He continued juggling 3 things at once: stage acting, translation, and voice acting. Sometimes Kobayashi would even translate the very scripts for the productions he would perform in. Kobayashi also helped found the Tokyo Actors Consumers Cooperative Society, and of his passing in 2022, was the organization's oldest active member. This multipolar focus continued right up until the end of the 1960s when the Izumi Theater dissolved, and Kobayashi began concentrating on his voice work. It was just at this time that a little internal project fell into his lap, the Lupin III pilot film. Monkey Punch had considered Kobayashi for Jigen from the very beginning. When first designing Jigen, he'd envisioned James Corbin from The Magnificent Seven as the character's template. And who happened to voice Corbin whenever the actor appeared in the Japanese dub? Why, Kobayashi Kiyoshi, of course. Kobayashi had read a few issues of Lupin and was excited to take on the role. It was a tantalizing role. You wouldn't say Jigen was handsome, but more of an urbane dandy. It was a worthwhile, intriguing opportunity. And so he began a role that would last well into the 21st century. Jigen, Kobayashi has said, was essentially voiced using his natural speaking voice. People he spoke to would often say, "Yeah, you're Jigen." He expressed a similar sentiment himself, often saying, "Jigen is my other self." In later decades, companies would often hire Kobayashi to provide narration for variety shows and other programs, telling him to use his natural voice. In other words, to have Jigen serve as show narrator. He became close with Lupin's voice actor Yamada Yasuo off-screen, calling him Yasupe, and the two would often play golf together. He was the only main cast member from the classic era to continue providing his voice for the character after the major 2011 cast changeover. "We just couldn't find anyone else who really fit the role," he would later say. It was a hard role to fill. And by the time he finally retired, Kobayashi was essentially a living legend. If Jigen Daisuke is Lupin's constant partner in crime, then Mine Fujiko is the femme fatale, always an inch away from a double cross, but whom Lupin is always ready to forgive. Masuyama Eiko originated the voice of Fujiko back in 1969. Voicing the character in the first Lupin III TV pilot, an adaptation of the action manga by author Monkey Punch. While another actress was chosen for the role when the pilot went to series in 1971, Masuyama returned to Fujiko in the second and arguably most iconic Lupin series, airing from 1977 to 1978. She continued to voice the character for another 33 years, including in the third Lupin series from 84 to 85, and nearly 30 theatrical and TV anime films. Among these is 1979's beloved Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro, the theatrical directorial debut of master animator Miyazaki Hayao, who'd helmed the second half of Lupin III Part 1 alongside fellow Studio Ghibli founder Takahata Isao. Masuyama retired from playing Fujiko in 2010, with Sawashiro Miyuki taking over the role. Fujiko wasn't the only iconic character originated by Masuyama. The voice actress was also the first to play the transforming heroine, Cutie Honey, in the original 1973 series of the same name, based on the manga by prolific creator Naya Goro.
ファッションモデルのファンシーハニー。またある時は花形レーサーハリケーンハニー。そしてもう一つの顔は病院に救ったルンペンハニー。
Masuyama Eiko was born in Tokyo in 1936. Growing up during the war years, she had a slow manner of speech as a child. A frustrated teacher made the blunt critique, "Can't you speak correctly?" The word shocked her, and Masuyama developed an inferiority complex. But she found her confidence after joining a children's acting company, where voice actress Aso Miyoko mentored her. Aso herself would go on to originate the character Fune in the long-running mega-popular Sazae-san series. One day, Aso took Masuyama to a play being put on by another children's theater company. There, she witnessed a young man playing the role of a prince. She was stunned by his acting prowess and later remembered thinking, "Someday I want to stand on the same stage as him." The youth was none other than Naya Goro, who would go on to voice Inspector Zenigata, Lupin III's arch-nemesis, for decades alongside Masuyama. Masuyama began taking on stage, voice acting, dubbing, and radio roles from the age of 15. Soon she decided to focus on voice acting. While she loved acting on stage and in front of the camera, voice acting would give her more time to raise a family. She joined the major talent agency Aoni Production in the 1960s. Early roles included those in the original Astro Boy series in 1963 and Kimba the White Lion in 1965. She worked steadily in a wide variety of series and movies over the decades. Masuyama successfully portrayed Fujiko in her first appearance in the Lupin III pilots. Initially, she was slated to continue with the role when the series was picked up. However, she was suddenly taken off the role and replaced with Nikaido Yukiko. Osumi Masaaki, the initial series director, later recalled why this had occurred. He claimed Masuyama had difficulty with the more sexually charged scenes between Lupin and Fujiko, a major part of the character's dynamic. Masuyama was let go, but did return for a single episode as a one-off character, even exchanging dialogue with her replacement, Nikaido. To viewers in the early 1970s, Nikaido was the original Fujiko. And of this video, Nikaido is the only classic-era Lupin VA who's still around. Beset with poor ratings, the first Lupin series was cancelled after airing only 23 episodes. Years of reruns followed, with the show's popularity increasing in syndication. TV Tokyo decided to have a second go at the franchise. This time, the producers decided upon a new actress to portray Fujiko. Nikaido had retired from acting in 1972 upon the birth of her second son. The role ended up going to an actress who wasn't quite brand new to playing Fujiko, however, with Masuyama auditioning and securing the role fairly easily. She'd found herself thinking of Fujiko over the years and had wanted another chance with the character. Fans initially balked at the recast. Angry letters flooded the TV Tokyo offices demanding Nikaido return. Masuyama recalled thinking, "I won't be able to morph into Nikaido-san no matter how I try, so I just have to play the character in my own distinct way." Her version would become so popular that as late as 2012, a fan poll listed her Fujiko among the top characters who should never change voice actors. Two more core Lupin characters remain. One is the taciturn samurai Goemon, who wields the Zantetsuken, a sword capable of slashing through almost anything. Goemon first appeared as an antagonist to Lupin's gang, but within a few episodes had become an ally. Goemon appears perhaps the least of the core 5 Lupin characters, and like Fujiko, the character went through a few different voice actors. Goro Naya portrayed him in the initial pilot, and why does that name sound so familiar? Meanwhile, in the first series, Goemon was voiced by Otsuka Chikako, a well-known voice actor and father to Otsuka Akio. More on him later. It was only with the second Lupin series that Goemon received the voice he'd have for over 30 years to come, Inoue Makio. Inoue was the youngest of the core five, born in 1938. Unlike Yamada and Kobayashi, both Tokyoites, Inoue came from the countryside. Growing up in rural Yamanashi Prefecture, he recalled one evening when his older brother took him by the hand and led him across the rice fields to a warehouse where local villagers were putting on a play. This was his first encounter with theater. Soon after, on the night of 6 July 1945, he'd experienced the traumatic bombing of Kofu, when US forces carpet-bombed and destroyed his family home. He emerged as a pacifist. When his family moved to Tokyo some years later, he took the opportunity to join his middle school's drama club, and by the age of 16, he'd even appeared in small roles on TV. The country boy was making good in the big city. In his last years of high school, a teacher thought differently, admonishing that you should limit your focus on acting and concentrate on your studies. Inoue recalled thinking, "If you say that to me, I'll show you. I'll keep acting at the cost of all else." He soon put those words into practice, forming an underground theater troupe alongside a few friends. Times were tough and the troupe needed money. An acquaintance got him an audition for the dubbing role of the US sitcom The Many Lives of Dobie Gillis. Inoue was selected for a lead role. Soon he was working on his first anime role, for none other than the original Astro Boy, often called the first TV anime. Inoue, like Yamada and Kobayashi, had managed to be in the right place at the right time. The 1950s and the early 1960s were Japan's so-called first voice acting boom. Radio dramas were popular again, and the rise of television anime and foreign film dubbing created a new industry starved for talent. The popularity of voice actors allowed studios to harness their star power, drawing an audience off the name of a certain voice actor who might appear in both anime and live-action dubbing. From 1969, Inoue was a member of Aoni Productions, Japan's first voice actor talent agency. He was soon among the most recognizable voices in the industry. At first, Inoue considered voice work as nothing more than a part-time job to subsidize his real passion, theatrical acting. But as the voice actor boom brought him into the spotlight, his views began to change. He would later say that his fans helped him shift his perspective on what acting really meant. Nonetheless, he still preferred to think of himself as an actor rather than a voice actor. To get into character, he'd often wear the type of clothing he imagined his characters would wear. So when recording for Goemon, he'd often wear a samue. The Goemon character changeover from Otsuka to Inoue from Series 1 to 2 was explained to Inoue as the result of a shift in the character. Series 1 Goemon was a hard, bloodthirsty man, but the Goemon of the new Lupin would be a young, naive, handsome master swordsman. Inoue was known for characters that combined youthful and mature aspects, which would fit this new Goemon well. Inoue knew fans would compare him to Otsuka, and took the role with a sense of anxiety. He recognized Goemon was the most changeable character in the cast, with his personality shifting based on plot convenience. Still, he enjoyed finding the character's truth in the midst of all that, and in finding ways to exude personality amidst the laconic samurai's sparse dialogue. Inoue would originate another highly popular 70s character, Captain Harlock. He voiced the iconic space pirate from 1978 all the way into the late 1990s. Only one member of the core classic crew remains to be spoken of, Naya Goro. Like Kobayashi and Masuyama, Naya originated part of the Lupin gang in the 1969 pilot film, but not the character he's best known as. Rather, he was the very first actor to portray Goemon, a good 8 years before Inoue took on the role. In 1971, he was brought back for the first Lupin series, but this time as Lupin's eternal nemesis in a never-ending game of cat and mouse, Inspector Zenigata. Naya Goro was the oldest of the main cast, being born in 1929 in Hakodate, Hokkaido. Unlike the others who experienced World War II as young civilians, Naya entered into the military in the dying days of the war. He was only 15 when he enlisted in the kamikaze, believing it was his duty to die for the Emperor. The war came to a close before he even had a chance to board a fighter plane. The end of the war left him without purpose, and he wandered aimlessly from job to job. He was suffering what many in the country were suffering at the time, a state of hopelessness and despair called kyodatsu. He was briefly a journalist and joined the Japanese Communist Party during that era. He'd continue to support the party for years to come. It wasn't until he was in university that he took a liking to acting. Connections made there led him to some radio jobs, and soon he was caught up in the voice acting boom. He was noted for his gravelly voice, which he believed allowed for his longevity as Zenigata. If I played him with a more handsome voice, I'd have lost the ability to continue by now, he would later say. Lupin director Osumi Masaaki loved Naya's hard-boiled voice and thought it would perfectly match the killer samurai Goemon. Naya, however, balked at Goemon's lack of dialogue. When Lupin went to series, he managed to wrangle the meatier role of Zenigata. His version of Zenigata diverged from the manga counterpart, taking on a more buffoonish, comedic aspect, something the series staff and Monkey Punch decided would make the character a little bit more unique and mesh well with the animated format.
ルパン貴様にはこれから不自由な暮らしが待っておるぞ最後逆らっても無駄ださあキリキリ来いあら抵抗しても無駄だもう逃げられんぞ
Naya loved Zenigata's single-minded pursuit of Lupin and wished he could feel so confident with a single life goal. With Lupin Part 2, the classic crew was now assembled, working in tandem on over 200 episodes and innumerable films and specials together. Kobayashi recalled that, "We had good teamwork, like a jazz band." Lupin and Zenigata may have been eternal enemies in the series, but in real life, Yamada Yasuo and Naya Goro were friends and compatriots.
お前がこんなに友情に熱いなんて
They both belonged to the same theater troupe, Theater Echo. They'd already appeared together in productions prior to Lupin, so they felt their on-screen interactions came to them naturally. They'd often head to a rented beachside house in Chiba after recordings, enjoying spending time together. The two spoke of growing old with Lupin and Zenigata, forever chasing after each other like their animated counterparts. But it was not to be. In 1993, a quarter century into their time working together on Lupin, Yamada Yasuo suddenly took ill. 2 years later, while the 5 cast members were working on the 5th theatrical Lupin film, Farewell to Nostradamus, Yamada slipped into a coma. The remaining crew was left in shock. Yamada, so intrinsically associated with Lupin, was considered irreplaceable. Some considered that the Lupin franchise should end without him there to portray the irascible thief. But Farewell to Nostradamus was so far into production that theatrical posters had been issued with Yamada Yasuo's name already on them. Yamada had even provided voiceover for trailers for the film, doing his recording while using a wheelchair.
Lupin 3世映画化決定今度は何をして出すか
With the film nearly ready to go out the door, voice director Kato Satoshi decided to find a new Lupin. For such an iconic character, it was a momentous yet rushed decision. Auditions were held, and rumor has it Beat Takeshi was considered for the role, with the pick of the litter being someone who wasn't technically even a voice actor. Rather, he was a famed impressionist. Enter Kurita Kanichi. Kurita was a one-time salaryman who'd parlayed his skills at impersonating singers at karaoke into guest gigs on 1980s Japanese TV and had soon found himself being labeled amongst the most popular impressionists in the country. It just so happened that Yamada's recognizable voice as Lupin was something Kurita enjoyed mimicking on TV. Soon Yamada and Kurita were appearing on variety shows together. They struck up a friendship. Kurita agreed to audition to record some fill-in dialogue for Nostradamus that Yamada, now in a coma, hadn't been able to record. When he realized he was actually being asked to completely take over the role for the film, he balked. Naya Goro, however, felt Kurita was the right person for the job. He encouraged Kurita to honor their friend Yamada by filling in as Lupin. But Yamada never woke up from his coma. Before the film was released, he passed away. Naya gave a memorial address at Yamada's funeral where, in tears, he spoke in the voice of Zenigata. "Hey Lupin, who am I supposed to chase after if you're not here?" And so, the first major generational changeover took place. Nostradamus ended with a caption reading, "Eien no Lupin Sansei, Yamada Yasuo-san, arigato." To Yamada Yasuo, the eternal Lupin. Thank you.
長い25年以上のその俳優生活で虹はおつかみになりました。
全然掴んでおりません。
そうですか。
はい。
でも楽しみでしょ。いつ虹がつかめるかなと思うと。
無理ですよ。
どうして？
20ってのは使っちゃいけないんですよ。
いいこと言う。
追っかけてっても追っかけてっても20ってのは追いつかないじゃないですか、きっと。
それはまあね。
あれでいいんですよ。
During his early tenure in the role, Kurita, impersonating his old friend, often felt as though his body was being possessed by Yamada. Masuyama Eiko, voicing Fujiko, would recall that during recording, I would have this shiver go down my spine, feeling like Yamada-san was present. I'd look over my shoulder for him. Kurita, however, was under a great deal of stress. He wasn't a trained actor, he was just an impressionist. The public was critical of his line delivery, and so was he.
そのありかが徳川慶喜の写真に隠されているという。さあ、俺様の出番かと思ったら銭形のとっつぁんが立ちはだかった。
The support of Naya, Masuyama, Kobayashi, and Inoue played a huge role in granting Kurita the confidence to keep on playing Lupin. So for 16 years until the early 2010s, this was the cast. 4 voice actors, mostly born in the 1930s, who'd emerged from the first voice acting boom, and Kurita, 20 years younger and not a trained actor. In fact, to this day, the only anime character Kurita voices is Lupin. For 17 Lupin features, mostly for TV, Kurita did his part amidst his 4 partners in crime. Then came 2010, and the aptly named Lupin TV special, The Last Job. The voices of the classic cast, Kobayashi, Naya, Inoue, and Masuyama, had been noticeably aging for some years. With 2011 being the Lupin anime's 40th anniversary, it was decided it was time to announce a new cast. Naya, Inoue, and Masuyama graciously stepped down from their roles that they'd occupied for decades. Naya said, "Zenigata never gets old, but I get older year by year, so it's a little difficult to match." He would pass away only 2 years later. From the original cast, Kobayashi was the only exception. He continued his role as Jigen for well more than a decade onwards. As for Kurita, still uncomfortable as a voice actor after all those years, he decided to turn over Lupin to a new third voice actor, but was convinced to stay on by the encouragement of the anime staff. He'd later reflect that, although the basis of the character is of course Yamada-san, I was finally able to play the part without first considering how he would do it. I would just think, all I have to do is play the part of Lupin. And while Yamada is still the eternal Lupin, Kurita has now voiced the character for 5 years longer than Yamada had at the time of his passing. And so the modern era of Lupin began. Kobayashi remained as the old guard, with Kurita slowly becoming something of a throwback himself. Fujiko was now portrayed by Sawashiro Miyuki, a prolific, professional voice actor, very much out of the modern voice acting industry. Goemon is voiced by Namikawa Daisuke, also highly prolific and known for his portrayal of anti-heroes. The role of Zenigata was taken over by Yamadera Koichi, well known outside of Japan for his prominent roles like Spike Spiegel in Cowboy Bebop and Togusa from Ghost in the Shell. In the 90s, he'd also replaced Inoue as the new voice of Captain Harlock. This new voice cast ushered in a Lupin revival. Starting with 2012's A Woman Called Mine Fujiko, the Lupin franchise has seen 4 new TV series. The first batch of TV series since Lupin III Part 3 ended in 1985. The new blood represented just how much the industry landscape had changed since the 1970s. The originals were mostly stage actors who fell into voice acting as the first boom erupted in the early days of television anime. They were some of the first voice acting celebrities in Japan, both for animation and Hollywood dubbing, during the first era when voice acting began to be associated as much with animation as with live action dubs. By the era of Lupin III Part 2, when all the classic Lupin voice acting crew were finally aligned in a single production, the phenomena of adult fans paying attention to anime production crews and cast was in the process of emerging. By 2011, however, voice acting had become a huge, professionalized industry in Japan. Voice acting hopefuls learn at specialized training facilities that aim to create new generations of voice acting professionals. An entirely formalized process exists of training, auditioning for production firms, followed by years of apprenticing, starting with small roles. Success brings with it a major following, not just for the character one portrays, but for the voice actor themselves. Voice Animage, a voice actor-focused sister magazine to the much older anime fandom magazine Animage, debuted in 1994, just a year before Yamada Yasuo passed away. The original Lupin crew witnessed the change of the social status of voice actors and actresses from a role of supporting anime works behind the scenes to that of advertising anime works in public.
この方はルパン、まずルパン三世のところちょっと座ってください。
Naya Goro was critical of the changes he'd seen over the decades, the end of individualistic professional actors with star power. The best thing for the new generation would be to act in some real, normal plays. The grand old days of Hollywood have ended, and I guess we've ended with them. Naya passed away in 2013, with 300 friends and fans gathered for a memorial at his beloved Echo Theater in Ebisu. Inoue Makio passed away in 2019, one day before his 81st birthday. He'd been performing voice acting roles until the end, even performing as Captain Harlock again for the game Super Robot Wars T, released posthumously. In his later years, he'd opined on the state of modern voice acting, echoing Naya's feelings. There's a lack of a basic understanding of acting. Of course there are great actors out there doing the work, but I'm not a big fan of those who are out there who just seem to think, well, this is good enough. Inoue encouraged modern voice actors to seek more originality rather than copying the voice styles of others. Upon hearing of Inoue's passing, Kurita reflected that he always treated me so kindly. Kobayashi, mourning Inoue, said, "You too, Goemon? So it's just me and Fujiko-chan left here. Zantetsuken too is crying." All the while, Kobayashi was still portraying Jigen. As the years went by, Kobayashi began to notice what he called a gap between the image on screen and myself. When, at the age of 88, he was finally compelled to end his half-century-long tenure as Jigen, Kobayashi remarked, "For me, Lupin has been a lifelong vocation. I put everything I had into it. I was selfish enough to want to continue until I was 90, so it's a pity. Lupin, I'll soon be making my getaway. Farewell." Kobayashi's final appearance as Jigen was in the first episode of the newest Lupin series, Part 6. Episode 0, The Times, gave the franchise an opportunity to grant the veteran actor a fond farewell, focusing on Jigen's relationship with the other characters, and facing down the reality of Lupin in a changing world. As of the next episode, Jigen has been voiced by the prolific Otsuka Akio, known for his highly recognizable deep voice. You may know him as the Japanese voice actor for Solid Snake, Blackbeard in One Piece, and much more. Otsuka was a fitting choice since his own father had been in the original cast, playing Goemon back in the first Lupin series in 1971.
こっちは散々付き合わされて、引退したら花屋で働けそうだぜ。
Within a year, Kobayashi had passed away. Tributes flooded in, including from all his younger castmates from latter-day Lupin. Otsuka said, "I'll carefully guard the role of Jigen, which you nurtured for 50 years, passing it on to the next generation." Kurita said, "You always gave me a little pull in the right direction, back when all I knew how to do was imitate. All I have for you is gratitude." And that leads us to Masuyama Eiko and the modern day. In her later years, Masuyama received various awards for her storied voice acting career. These included the Meritorious Service Award at the Tokyo Anime Award Festival in 2017, and she also received the Merit Award at the 15th Annual Seiyu Awards 3 years ago, in 2021. With Masuyama's passing on May 20th, 2024, Kurita Kanichi, the current voice of Lupin, took to Twitter to reflect upon his relationship with Masuyama. To me, she was always the elegant, admirable Fujiko-chan, the lone flower amongst those men. When I couldn't tell my right from my left, she would gently tell me about the old days with Yamada Yasuo leading the troupe as the original Lupin. She'd say, "Yasube would have done it like this. She welcomed me into the Lupin family." And so the world turns. The classic Lupin V were truly of another era. They had experienced the devastation of war and had grown up as devotees of theater and classical acting. They strode through the changes of the 20th century with the rise of television and popular animation for kids and adults. They were of the perfect age to embody Lupin and his crew's post-radical, freewheeling 1970s attitude. Lupin, as envisioned first by Monkey Punch, then by Osumi Masaki, and by Miyazaki Hayao. In the late 70s and even 80s, Lupin changed with the times, growing naturally into each era, and then from the 1990s, they emerged as a sort of throwback, an unaging, unchanging classic continuing far beyond the era that birthed it. Sadly, human beings aren't cartoon characters. Lupin, like Homer Simpson, will forever be some nebulous age, a creature born of one era but forced to exist in a very different one. But the people who brought us these characters in the first place, eventually, we have to say farewell to them. So, abayo, Lupin and Jigen, and Fujiko, and Goemon, and even Tosan, Inspector Zenigata. And farewell to the eternal classic cast of Lupin III. Alright, minasan, thanks for watching this one. I've wanted to make something about Lupin for some time now, and since I'm particularly fond of old school Lupin III, honoring the voice actors who helped establish the characters seemed like something very much worth doing. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned a bit about the lives of these characters. If you've never seen any Lupin III before, a good place to start is of course The Castle of Cagliostro, directed by Miyazaki Hayao. It's by far the most seen of all the Lupin features, and I would say is one of the best adventure movies ever made, at least in my perspective. I also want to give a shout out to Nikaido Yukiko, who introduced the public to Fujiko with her take on the role in Lupin III Part 1. While this video was about the passing of the core Lupin crew of old, Nikaido is actually still out there, the sole main old guard Lupin cast member who's still with us. Like the other classic voice actors, she was a trained actress who often appeared on live-action television dramas. Her family is full of impressive actors and professionals. She left show business in 1972 with the birth of her second son. Sadly, Nikaido has been afflicted with dementia for over a decade and currently resides in a specialized nursing home at the age of 83. We wish her the best. Thank you again for tuning in, so to say. I have another big history video coming down the pipeline, as well as one more Lupin-related video I'm planning to make on a bit more of a lighthearted subject. Hope to see you then. And until then, if you enjoyed this video, consider giving us a like, subscribing, or even supporting the channel via our Patreon page, which continues to do so much to keep us going. So, until next we meet, mata.